On behalf of Dr. Subhi Ali, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Jerusalem Fund for Education and Community Development, and its educational program, the Palestine Center, I would like to welcome you to the Hisham Sharabi Memorial Lecture. Since its inauguration, only the most distinguished speakers have been invited to deliver a lecture under this banner, and today's speaker is evidence of that. Professor John Dugard has a very long and impressive resume and biography, which I'll try to keep very short. Professor John Dugard is Professor of Law in the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. Currently, he is a visiting Distinguished Professor of Law at Duke University. And if you can all please turn off your cell phones so that we don't interrupt this lecture. Thank you. Professor Dugard has held several visiting positions in the U.S., including Princeton, Berkeley, and Pennsylvania. Since 1997, he has been a member of the UN International Law Commission, and from 2000 to 2006 was Special Rapporteur on Diplomatic Protection to the Commission. From 2002 to 2008, he was ad hoc judge in the International Court of Justice, and from 2001 to 2008, he served as Special Rapporteur to the UN Commission on Human Rights, reporting on violation of human rights and international humanitarian law in the Occupied Palestinian Territory. His publications include the Southwest Africa Namibia Dispute in 1973, Human Rights and South African Legal Order, 1978, Recognition and the United Nations in 1987, International Law and South African Perspective in 2005. Professor Dugard recently returned from a trip to the Gaza Strip, which is still the report is being written, so he will not speak in details about that, but he will be addressing occupation and apartheid under international law. Professor Dugard?
Thank you very much for your invitation to speak today. I'm very honored. It's a great occasion for the Jerusalem Fund, and I'm very pleased to be part of this memorial lecture. As Samar told you, I've just recently been to Gaza, but I can't speak freely about my visit to Gaza. I was part of a mission established by the League of Arab States to investigate violations of human rights and humanitarian law in Gaza. We visited at the end of February for a week, and we are still writing the report. So at this stage, I cannot really comment on our findings. You will appreciate that any attempt to attach responsibility to Israel is a sensitive issue and is bound to result in considerable criticism, and so we want to do a very careful job in preparing our report. But what I can say is that I have been visiting Gaza twice a year since 2001, and I have on previous occasions witnessed evidence of horrendous bombings and killings and house destructions. But the most recent attack surpassed all the others. There were more killings, 1,434 deaths, of which 288 were children, 121 women, and it's estimated that of the 1,400, over 900 were civilians. Of course, the Israeli government disputes this, but I think this is largely because the Israeli government tends to view anyone over the age of 16 as a potential terrorist, and certainly the Israelis view policemen as militants, whereas in fact policemen are under international law classified as civilians. And one must remember that the opening salvo, which was very much like an attack on Pearl Harbor, was an attack directed at a police parade in which 50 new recruits were killed. it's not only the number of deaths, but it's also the manner of killing. We spoke to a number of eyewitnesses who spoke about the way in which their parents, children had been shot in cold blood between the eyes by a member of the IDF at fairly short range. I found it really difficult to believe some of these stories, but they have now been confirmed by members of the IDF. You may have read that at a military academy in Israel there was an open discussion about the conduct of the war, and many members of the IDF spoke with some horror about the way in which their fellow soldiers had behaved. Also, some of the weaponry used was bound to cause unnecessary suffering. There was the use of white phosphorus, which Israel has conceded it used, and there was the use of flechettes. And both these weapons, when used in densely populated areas, do cause tremendous suffering. And then there was the destruction of property that we witnessed. What was extraordinary was the number of minarets of the mosques that had been shot out. It was quite clear that members of the IDF were simply having fun targeting minarets because they served no security purpose. And then there was the case of the Al-Wafa hospital, which in bold letters has hospital on the front, and there was a shell that had gone right through the word H, through the letter H. So it was quite clear that they were deliberately targeting a hospital. And then there was the Islamic University, which was partially destroyed. Allegedly, its laboratories were being used to manufacture armed weapons. And then there was the American school, which was hardly a Hamas target, which had been flattened. And then, of course, factories and businesses had been destroyed. Again, one couldn't easily describe them as Hamas targets. So the destruction of property and the killings were really very distressing. But as I say, we are dealing with issues of accountability and responsibility, and we will have to wait until our report is completed. Let me just say on the subject that I've been very disappointed about the international response to the conflict in Gaza. The Secretary General of the United Nations has initiated a limited inquiry into the bombing of UN property, but it goes no further. The Secretary General of the United Nations did visit Gaza. I think he was the first one ever to have visited Gaza, but he carefully refrained from speaking to any of the victims or visiting any of the destroyed property other than UN premises. This created quite an impression, poor impression in Gaza itself. There has been a request from 16 distinguished international lawyers and peace activists to create a proper independent inquiry commission. An approach has been made to the Security Council, but that doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. The Human Rights Council has mandated the establishment of a commission of inquiry, but the Human Rights Council is having difficulty in persuading people to join that commission. So it seems that the commission established by the League of Arab States may well be the only independent commission of inquiry to examine the situation.